Hello everyone, welcome back to Dragonfly Engineering. So this week we're going to finish up on this mold that we modified in the last episode where we added some additional ejector pins such that these 3 polycarbonate discs would eject correctly. Well, these 2 here, this one ejected fine, but these were warping because there weren't enough ejector pins. But we got cut short because of my friend called me to help clean out his garage and I got a bunch of cool stuff from it. So if you want to check that out, you can see the last episode. But this week we are going to get this thing on the molding machine and train the orange robot to pluck these parts out and trim them because we have to make several hundred of each. And like I've mentioned before, clipping runners off of plastic parts is the worst thing possible. So I will meet you over in the clean room where the molding machines are and we'll load this thing up first. Okay, so we're over here at the Boy 35, which is 35 metric clamping tons, or about 40 US tons. And I pulled the other mold out already. I'm switching up to this plastic, piece of scrap plastic for supporting the mold while I load it. So on the mold itself, I've added this steel alignment ring to the top, which keys into the A side of the molding machine. And then we'll just bring it over here and set it on our little plastic table, like so. And we're pretty close to being aligned. Okay, you can probably see how this alignment ring here wants to line up with that round hole on the A side of the molding machine. And I'm about, I don't know, 4 millimeters short, so I have to lift it up a little bit. So at this step, I like to have a couple of clamps ready to go. So I will prep this clamp here and be ready to lock it in place. So I have to lift it slightly and then bring it in. Now I'm not using thermal isolators because we're going to be running this mold for a while and we don't have liquid cooling in this mold, so I'm going to use the molding machine platen as an additional heat sink as well. Hopefully that won't be a problem, but I guess time will tell. Okay, I'm just going to visually see that the mold is square as I start to tighten this thing down. Here we go. I've got a bunch of these clamps right off screen here. I'm going to reach around and start bolting the backside too. Let me get a different camera angle for you. So now we got a top-down view and we can clamp, or I can show you how I'm clamping the rest of this. This wire is going to be a heater wire and the machine is off right now. So these are electric cartridge heaters that you can buy on McMaster-Carr or probably Amazon or everywhere. And it's just a electric resistor in a ceramic potting. And this white stuff is thermal grease, kind of like what you'd stick on your computer chips. And we shove these guys into the heater hole. And if it looks like it's too dry, then you add more thermal grease. Maybe I'll do that. So I'm going to go into and open up. Make sure the temperature bar is off. There we go. Things always heavily. Okay, just make sure we don't pinch our wires in the mold closes. So this is the B-side temperature door, or same type of heater. And stick this in. Okay. Okay, now we're ready to close the mold and put the heater. Okay, yeah, there's a black aluminum spacer, and I moved it to the center so that I could thread in this ejector plate actuation rod. And so far, so good. Also going to make sure I don't pinch any electrical wires. This is going to be close. Probably too close. Okay, I think I need to get a shorter push rod here. So I'll turn the pump off. And then we will slowly bring the platen forward, watching to make sure that we don't crash anything. And this gap is smaller than the gap from the thread adapter to the thread on the ejector piston rod, so that's good. But you still need to keep your head on a swivel because it's that one thing that you overlook that can shut you down. In fact, this wire was in this gap and not in the actual mold closing gap. Okay. So for the final close, and this is still in setup mode, so it'll be low pressure. We locked up, or didn't lock up, but we basically clamped the mold in alignment with its A side. So now what we're going to do is bolt the B side onto the B side platen. So there's probably several hundred pounds of force pushing on this mold. All right, so I got the GoPro here in my hand. We can check out the configuration. So the A side of the mold is bolted on with these strap clamps with the little triangle and the teeth. Then we got our heaters hooked up. The small wire is the thermistor, big wire is the heater on A and B side. And then we got more strap clamps below. These are 90 degrees, and you can see I kind of routed the wires so that they don't get pinched into the mold. And then in the back here, the next step is to open the mold up and then advance the ejector piston forward until this thread can couple onto this thread adapter here. And then we will be ready to go. We'll turn the heaters on and heat everything up. So turn on the motor and then we'll open the mold up. Just far enough so we don't smash the ejector pins into the A side. And then I'm going to advance the ejector plate forward in setup mode until we start to see the pins move forward like so. So I'm basically advancing this thread adapter on the two threads until it tightens up, and then there's a 1/2 inch jam nut. Yeah, so from the ejector plate all the way to the ejector cylinder is a solid cinch down connection of various thread adapters and thread rods. So it may be a little hard to see, but I'm going to move the injection unit forward until the nozzle touches the back of the mold in setup mode. It's kind of a squeak sound. There we go. So we're in contact, and then I'm going to teach that position as well. 0 set. Okay, I think we've got the basics of our setup going, so I'm going to start heating up the mold. And set. And we'll flip on these heater outputs, and then I'm going to come over here and make sure that there's no smoke anywhere. So while we're waiting for everything to heat up here, I can wake up Orange and see how it's doing with its program. I did make a new program which I copied from a previous program. So let's bring Orange to its home position, which is the beginning of where it starts a program at. And so I'm in teach mode right now. And there we go. I don't think the I-beam up there. I don't know if you can see the I-beam. You can probably see the hooks. These things right here. I don't think they're going to get in the way. All right. Well, we can start actually figuring out how to program this robot to do this action. I may have some issues right off the bat here. The guide pin for the mold is kind of right above where the sprue is going to be sticking out. But it's only sticking out like 1/2 inch or so from the leading edge of the steel of the 3 cavities. So I think we're going to be okay because the sprue on this thing is about that long. So the robot should be able to come down and grip it. We're going to pluck the part out of the mold with the sprue plus the 3-part assembly off of the mold. Then we're going to bring it over to this cutter there, this guy, to then cut the 3 things off of the runner, and then we're going to toss the runner into a waste bucket. And I'm going to be running this program on the robot teach pendant here in teach mode, which means I got to hold down this panic bar, which means you got to hold it in the middle so that if you panic, the robot will stop, and if you get lazy, the robot will stop. I'm going to be hitting this play button right here, and we're just going to play through whatever program we've got, and I will make adjustments as needed. And the robot will come down, and I should slow down the play speed because I'm not quite sure how it's going to behave. Yeah, so there was a different gripper on this robot, so I am going to have to basically rewrite a lot of this travel, which isn't a big deal. So I think what we're going to do is a 2-step process. We're going to make sure that we're molding good parts, and then the second step is going to be to train the robot to pluck the parts and trim them in this cutter right here behind me. Maybe I'll play around with updating this program a little bit more. I'll speed this up some more. And so these are the 3 angles on the end effector. If you want to see more about robot programming, I've got a couple more episodes. So I'm basically getting the gripper to be aligned with where the part is going to be in a position that's close to where it's actually going to open its claw and then grab it. So right about there. We'll come up a little bit in Z. Okay, there is our first position, and we are getting pretty close to temperature over here. So there's not a whole lot more I can do other than anticipate motions until we actually have the sprue sticking in. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next line and then tell it to, and we'll assume that the gripper is open, but I'm going to have it move down in Z and then move in so that we're close but not hitting that alignment pin of the mold. And I'm watching to make sure our tubing doesn't crash with anything too severe. And then I will update this position as well with touch up. Yes. And then there's an extra line here, which another position which I don't think we need. And then the next line after that would be output 1 set to true, which means turn on the gripper, or the gripper will grab onto our plastic part. So now we're going to move up in Z with our part in hand. Again, this is imaginary. To, let's say this position. So now I'm going to touch up here. And this is a position that is clear of the mold and the mold platen, such that the next command that is in this pre-written program is to pulse output 3 of the robot, which is tied to the input of the molding machine. And that basically tells, or the robot then tells the molding machine, you can go ahead and mold your next part because the gripper is clear of the crush zone of the clamp. And the robot is clear, and it is not in active mode right now, so I think we should see how our mold modification works. And we injected polycarbonate. Had about 1/8 of an inch of remaining plastic in the injection unit, which is called the cushion, or approximately 3 millimeter. And now we will see if we eject. Oh, it had a partial fill. Okay, well, it partially filled, so let's try again. And I'll probably start adjusting the packing pressure as our parts come out. Yeah, right now it's kind of low. But we'll see how our second shot looks. Oh, okay, that did feel a lot better. And it looks like the parts are ejecting well, but that was still an undershot. Man, we don't have much of a sprue either. So this was our last part. You can see the undershots there. And we still have undershots occurring. So I need to start increasing the pack pressure. hopefully you can see some of this, but I'm going to make this packing pressure 1300. And the pack pressure is the amount of pressure that the molding machine applies to the plastic after you've mostly filled the cavity of the mold. Whereas, okay, so this was like 1,000 across, and now it's 1,300. And then the fill pressure is 1,300 with 90% fill. So 1,300 is the hydraulic pressure of the molding machine, and it's difficult to translate that to an actual pressure of packing, but it's around 20,000 psi, or pounds per square inch. And then over here is, yeah, so I bumped it up to the fill pressure. The pack pressure is now the same, so there's really no pressure transition. So let's see how we do. And there you can see we've got a cushion of 5 millimeters, and then that auger shows we're refilling. And we'll see what our part looks like. Ah, I see full part. And it looked like it ejected. Let me grab that piece. So this is the part, of course it was on the floor, so there's some schmutz on it. But it looks like we have flat parts. Oh, it looks like an ejector pin needs adjusting though. Yeah, it looks like one of my ejector pins is too tall. So I may have to update that. Yeah, you can see it there. But let's run this in automatic mode and see how we're looking. So that was an undershot. So let me increase the pressure to 1,500 psi. And again, this is the hydraulic oil pressure in the molding machine. Looks like there is some undershot as well. I think we'll let this run for a little bit and bring up the last 15 degrees on the molds, because they are still not quite up to temperature. And usually your first 10 to 15 parts are throwaway anyway. Because I want to have these fill out but not be over pressurized. Because then you can get flash problems and other things. So this is the action on the screen. You can also check out the main screen, which kind of shows where we're at in the molding process. We'll see what our part looks like. Yeah, it's coming out. That kind of that stiction sound is common with polycarbonate, at least in my experience, because it is kind of more of a glassy material than polypropylene or polyethylene. Yeah, things are looking good. Uh-oh, I think my wife just texted me. May have to pause for dinner. I think I figured out what I did wrong. Yeah, this pin and this pin are too long, but this pin and this pin are too short. So I mixed up my pins because this part is thicker than these parts. So I've got 2 ejector pins in the thin parts and 2 when that should be in the thick part, and vice versa. Well, it's the next morning, and I've decided to try to swap out these ejector pins that I put in the wrong spot with the mold still loaded partially on the molding machine. All right, so now that we got the ejector pins fixed in this mold, I've done a little bit of a pre-programming, more than what we did previously, just to get the basic motions of the robot under control. and the molding machine will start. So I'm going to turn off the manual override, so now it won't start again until the robot tells it that it's clear. Here we're going to see how our progress is going. I usually like to stay on the emergency stop. Okay, so now I'm going to, now the robot's waiting for the mold to open, and it got the signal, so it's going in and it is going to pluck the part. Oh, not quite. Looks like it missed it. Okay, so I'll back off. And I guess the parts fell out. So, all right, we're gonna back the program or the robot all the way out. And we'll try that again. So here I'm gonna have to line up the gripper just right to the sprue. Yeah, that top disc may be a problem. Okay, I got you zoomed in on where the robot claw is got to deal with pulling this part out. And I'm worried about this disc right here. It seems like whenever the three parts eject with this polycarbonate kind of has stiction to the mold, so when it ejects, it wants to pop out of the mold. And you can see how that disc is flopped over. And now it's interfering with us being able to actually grab the sprue. And we may actually have to knock that top disc off and have a collection bin here under the molding machine to collect that first disc, to segregate the first disc from the rest. If that disc is going to keep flopping over like this and blocking the robot's access to the sprue. And it may have been what happened before. We'll probably see that that disc gets jammed up in there in the corner of the claw and then pushes everything away. See how it's getting locked in, and then it starts to push the entire molded tree down and away, which actually pushes the sprue out of alignment of the claw. So I'm going to back out of this step. And I think what we need to do is train the robot to grip and break off that first part, or probably just knock it off side to side. And then the robot can go in and grab the sprue and trim off the last two parts over at the clipper. Now I did design this mold so that these parts can just break off. They're like very small gates. I'm making sure I'm not going to hit anything in the molding machine. Then we're going to change the angle of the end effector like this. And we're just going to knock that top part off and hope that the sprue holds. And then we'll see how our little sequence goes. Okay, so the part is all, that top disc is all jacked up again. Okay, now we'll see how we do. We kind of missed it that time. Okay, there, it knocked it off. So now the question is, did our sprue move enough where we are going to crash or not be able to grab it? Oh, we could. There we go. So now the robot will pick things up and out of there. So there it goes. So we come up to the part like there, and then I am going to update the subsequent points by playing with the angles. So come down on Z, bring the angle up correctly. That was close. I'm just gonna nestle this part right up to this clipper. This is similar to an operation I did a couple weeks ago on a different part. All right, so let's go ahead and hit this pulse and see if, so we're gonna put an output to the clipper to tell it to clip for about half a second. There it did, and it launched it. So I will hit play to release. There it goes. And then it's going to go back to its home position. Oh, Well, there it knocked the whole thing off. Might have some optimization to do here. I'll be back. So we'll try knocking off our disc. Kind of, not really. There it knocked off. Okay, we're back. So I did some fussing with this program for about an hour, and we finally got something that works. It's not quite ideal, but you know, it's making it happen. So you can see the 3 parts go over to the clipper, and we clip off the 2 big parts. And unfortunately, we got to put the little part in with the sprue waste because I can't fit it under the claw to do that 3rd cut. And a lot of times the part will just shoot off of the mold here pretty soon anyway. Once the mold warms up, the little part, the thicker part, just kind of launches off. Parts, when they eject, they would kind of lean forward, and it's kind of variable depending on the status of the mold temperature and everything. So I added this resetting nudging step to the robot. So yeah, you can see how I'm pushing that guy back in and that one over, and then I can grab and pull. So as the mold settles in, then the parts are going to start shooting out more and more, like you see there. So I got to push them back in with the robot. That way the discs don't actually interfere with the claw on the end effector and mess everything up or knock the part out of the mold. So a lot of times you wind up running a mold manually with your own fingers, and then you basically record what you do to fix it. So like here, I'm basically doing what I would have done with my hand, but there's a robot doing it now. The trick is you got to cover all the possible scenarios, so they're starting to flare out more and more. But you know, just push them back. Seems like the 3rd one in the far back doesn't really get affected too much, and eventually that top disc will start just shooting off. But the robot's fixing all it can. All right, so we're gonna see how the robot clips these parts off. It pulled it out of the mold now, and now it's shuttling over to the clipping area, which is hanging off the wall of the clean room. There, it clipped the first part, and now it's moving to the pounce position for the 2nd. And then the 3rd part, which I can't clip off because it's in the way of the gripper, is basically dumped into the bin with the runner. So I will have to clip the sprue off and collect those the smaller, thicker discs, but it's not a big deal. The more labor I can eliminate, the better. But I don't want to spend more labor programming this robot than the amount of labor it takes to take that last disc off of the runner. So it's a balance of labor. Well, it looks like I got this robot automation going about as good as we can for the payoff for the amount of time savings we're making. It's not completely perfect because, you know, parts still shoot out of the mold and the robot doesn't get them. But, you know, it's good enough. It saved about 80% of the work. So thanks for watching. Oh, there we go. Next week, we're going to get Green Robot working on its part, probably the same time that Orange is finishing up its job. So a special thanks to my patrons on Patreon for helping with the show, and a special thanks to all my subscribers and viewers as well. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks. Checking me out on Peace.